A shriek pierced the silence of the marble-floored penthouse in Bel-Air Heights. A kettle of scalding water was tilted, its contents spilling onto the frail, disabled mother. Her skin recoiled and blistered as a cry of agony tore through the opulent air. The daughter-in-law, draped in a white silk chemise, her eyes as cold as polished steel, emptied the kettle once more. Then, the door to the master suite burst open so violently that the linen curtains whipped against the glass. A man in a tailored dark suit, just back from a long business summit in Shanghai, froze on the threshold. "Anya! What are you doing?" "That's my mother." The kettle clattered onto the imported limestone floor, the boiling water splashing out. The sharp, metallic scent of burnt flesh choked the air. The mother's eyes were wide, fixed on her son, not with anger, but with deep, abiding sorrow. A deep, gentle voice narrates, "Some wounds don't live on the skin, they live inside the heart. Sometimes we chase ambition so far that we forget where we came from. But fate always finds a way to bring us back to witness the very fire we once used to burn others." You are watching Global Fables, where every story is a mirror of mercy, love, and conscience. Comment where you're watching from: London, Toronto, Sydney, Mumbai, Berlin. Type "Thank you Mom" to honor the woman who once sacrificed everything for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Global Fables to watch the full emotional and shocking story and to discover the fate of the cruel daughter-in-law and the lesson that silenced the world. Listen closely. Because beyond that kettle of scalding water, it wasn't just skin that burned. It was a heart consumed by greed. The floating village of Klong Toi. By the murky canals of Klong Toi, Bangkok, where wooden shacks stand precariously on stilts and morning steam seeps through the cracks of every plank, people often saw Yai Boon. Her silver hair, like threads of mist, sat quietly in her rusty wheelchair. She would sit still, turning the old wheel with trembling hands, her eyes gazing toward the marketplace where vendors sold street food, salvaged goods, and fragrant jasmine rice, the very things that once kept her alive. In her youth, Yai Boon was the strongest woman in all of Klong Toi. She carried sacks of rice, baskets of fish, and bundles of salvaged wood, pushing her old cart across shaky wooden footbridges. She raised her only son, Kit, with sun-weathered hands and an unshakable faith that the poor may be born near the mud, but they don't have to die in it. Every morning, she woke before the monk's morning alms round, lighting a fire from the ashes of the previous night, cooking rice porridge while whispering her prayer, "Lord, give my son a bright path and the wisdom to find his way back." Kit was a brilliant boy, his eyes clear as rainwater after a monsoon. She used to say, "When you smile, my son, even the market smells forget to sting my eyes." The day Kit won a scholarship to study in America, Klong Toi exploded with joy. Cymbals, songs, and dancing filled the floating village. People proudly called her Mama Harvard. She smiled through tears, "He's gone, but my heart will walk beside him." Yet, the years that followed were cruel. An accident on the bridge left her paralyzed from the waist down. Her old wooden cart became her home, her small cooking stove, her only warmth during rainy nights. Neighbors helped when they could, but her world grew smaller with each season. Every evening, she sat by the doorway, watching people pass. One day, a girl selling flowers stopped and asked, "Grandma, why doesn't anyone visit you?" She smiled, eyes distant, "People only return when they remember their roots. But when they forget, all they see is dust on the road." At night, she turned on her old transistor radio, the only gift Kit had ever sent home. Whenever she heard news about international firms and wealthy entrepreneurs, she would smile faintly, "Maybe my son is somewhere like that now." Then one day, a delivery man knocked on her door with a letter bearing the name, Siam Global Holdings. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a photograph, Kit standing beside the CEO, dressed in a sharp white suit, smiling proudly. Below it read, "For a brighter Thailand." Her tears fell onto the photograph, mixing with the dust on the table. She whispered, "Your light is shining so bright, my son. But do you still remember the little flame that once kept you warm? Then came the rainy nights. The canal swelled. The damp smell filled her shack. She wrapped herself in a blanket, listening to thunder in the distance, softly singing, "If you ever return, I'll tell you about the fire that never went out." Until one morning, the sound of a luxury sedan stopping outside her hut. Two men in dark suits appeared. "Madam Boone?" "Yes, that's me. We've been ordered to take you to Bel-Air Heights. Your son is now a billionaire," Mr. Kit sang. She froze. 10 years of waiting. And at last, her son remembered. Tears rolled down her trembling hands. The old wheelchair rolled slowly toward the gate, its wooden wheels creaking over the wet planks. The whole of Klong Toi stopped to watch. Everyone knew that a poor mother was finally being taken to paradise. But what Yai Boone didn't know was that the place awaiting her was not paradise, but a palace of pride, where a wealthy wife would see her as nothing more than a stain on marble floors. And within that grand mansion, a kettle of scalding water was waiting to test the heart of a son who once swore he would take his mother to where she truly belongs. The Palace of Pride. The glossy black Rolls-Royce turned through the automatic gates of the Bel-Air Heights estate. The Bangkok sunlight glinted off its windows, sliding across the abstract marble statues at the entrance. When the car stopped, Yai Boone sat motionless in her wheelchair, eyes wide like a child lost in another world. Before her stood a mansion that blazed like a palace, white walls, charcoal-tiled roofs, and tall marble columns carved with precision. From the back garden drifted the faint scent of magnolia, so distant from the wood smoke that had once wrapped around her life. Kit stepped out of the car, his black suit immaculate, his sunglasses reflecting the evening sun. He bent down to hug his mother, his voice trembling with pride. "Mama, I told you one day you'd live like a queen." She smiled faintly, her wrinkled hand resting on his chest. "You've done well, my son, but I only hope you still remember the smell of jasmine rice in our kitchen." From the balcony above, Anya, Kit's wife, appeared, her white silk gown flowing, her perfume expensive and sharp. Her eyes swept over Yai Boone quickly, then paused on the rust stains of the wheelchair. "Welcome, Mama," she said in her crisp, polished accent. "We've prepared a room for you." "Sorry, it's downstairs. The upper floor isn't ideal for wheelchairs." The words were polite, but the distance in her eyes was colder than porcelain. Yai Boone was wheeled into a room at the end of the hall. It was small, tiled, and cold white, with a modern, minimalist print on the wall. No window to the garden, just a single pot of white orchids on the table. It was meant to be elegant, but it lacked a heartbeat. That first night, the dinner table glowed under candlelight. Glasses of deep red wine shimmered. Kit spoke about global deals, high-yield investments, and million-dollar contracts. Yai Boone sat quietly in the corner, her frail hands trembling as she held her spoon. She tried to tell a story about Klong Toi, about the neighbor who helped her light the stove during hard years. But before she could finish, Anya interrupted, "Mama, that sounds lovely, but Kit and I have to discuss the Singapore partnership tonight." Silence fell. The soft clinking of forks on porcelain plates filled the air. Kit forced a smile and said gently, "Tomorrow, Mama." She nodded, her eyes reflecting the candlelight like small, trembling tears. The boiling point. Days turned into quiet isolation. Each morning, a young maid placed her food at the door and disappeared. Each night, laughter echoed from the living room, the sound of glasses clinking, lounge music, and sometimes Anya's voice calling out, "Honey, don't let your mother's medicine smell stick to the furniture. It gives me headaches." One afternoon while Kit was away at a meeting, Anya entered the room, her heels striking the marble floor with dry, sharp clicks. "You know, Mama," she began softly, but with a blade beneath her tone. "This house thrives on refinement. The smell of wood smoke or ointments doesn't belong here." Yai Boone stayed silent, her thin hands resting on the wheels. "If that's how you feel," she said calmly, "I can sit outside near the mango tree." "Suit yourself," Anya replied. From that day on, she was almost forgotten. Separate meals, quiet nights. The wind through the balcony rails sounded like the sigh of someone no longer welcome. But what hurt her most wasn't the coldness, it was her son's eyes. Whenever she called him, he still smiled, but there was a glass wall between them. He no longer sat to hear her stories, no longer kissed her hands the way he did in Klong Toi. His words had become measured, precise, like a man talking to shareholders, not his mother. One rainy night, she heard thunder rumble and smelled the wet earth seeping through the cracks of her door. She tried to will herself to the porch, hoping to feel a few drops of Bangkok rain, the rain that once mixed with the dust of her village. But as she reached the threshold, the maid blocked her way. "Madam said you mustn't go outside. The floor will get dirty." Yai Boon smiled softly, "My dear, rain doesn't dirty the earth. It only washes away the dust of those who forget." That night, Kit returned late. The scent of cologne lingered on his suit. She looked at him for a long moment and asked quietly, "Kit, are you happy?" He hesitated. "Of course, Mama. I have everything a man could dream of." She nodded, her fading smile trembling. "Everything. But can you still smell the jasmine in your heart?" He said nothing, just bent down to kiss her hand, a gesture he hadn't made in years. But that kiss felt colder than ever. As he left the room and the door closed behind him, Yai Boon looked at the orchid on her table. The flower was blooming beautifully, but its roots were trapped in porcelain without soil. She thought to herself, perhaps that is my son's life, too. She sighed softly. Outside, rain fell upon the tiled roof, and somewhere in the shadows, the first drop of water landed on a shining, steel electric kettle. Something was beginning to boil. Not just water, but the quiet, burning rage of a woman who once swore she would never share her husband with the past. The unbreakable bond. The Bangkok morning blazed with sunlight, a cloudless sky sharp and gold. From above, the Kit mansion gleamed like a jewel in Bel-Air Heights, a world where the wealthy lived far from the smell of sweat and street food that belonged to real life. But inside that shining palace, a storm was forming, not in the sky, but in the heart of a woman. Anya had been awake since dawn. She stood before the mirror, admiring herself in a silk blue gown, then glanced down at the letter on the table, a share transfer agreement from Siam Global Holdings. All it needed was Yai Boon's signature, and 20% of Kit's fortune would belong to her. But the old woman, frail, her hands trembling, had simply shaken her head. "My son's wealth is not for sale, not for deceit." Those words fell like burning coal into Anya's pride. From that day, the respect in her eyes was replaced by quiet contempt. That morning, Kit was leaving for Kuala Lumpur to meet investors. He kissed his wife lightly on the cheek and said, "Take care of Mama for me, okay?" Anya smiled, her lips curved sweetly, but her eyes were cold still. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I'll take good care of her." The door closed. The Rolls-Royce's engine faded into the distance. The house fell silent, only the antique clock ticking slowly and the faint bubbling sound of the electric kettle in the kitchen. Yai Boon sat by the window, trying to will herself toward the porch to catch a little sun. The weather had been kind lately. She wanted to dry her small blanket, the one that still carried the smell of balm and wood smoke. She heard the echo of Anya's heels approaching. "Mama, why are you still using that old blanket?" "Because it's still warm, like Kit's arms when he was little." Anya laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "He's not that dirty Klong Toi boy anymore. He's a man of high society. You should know your place." The sunlight caught the scar on Yai Boon's arm. It glowed red like a memory that refused to fade. "My dear," she said quietly, "nobility isn't in marble walls. It's in the heart that still knows how to bow." Anya slammed a cloth onto the table. "Enough. I'm done with the smell of ointment, your morning prayers, your pitiful stories. Who do you think you are? Just because you're his mother, you think you own this house? Yaibun tried to will back, but the wheels caught on the thick carpet. Anya stepped closer, hands trembling, eyes burning with hate. You won't sign the papers? Fine. Maybe you need a little lesson to learn who really owns this place. She turned, yanked the plug from the kettle. Steam burst out violently, swirling in the air like a brewing storm. Anya, the old woman's voice quivered. Don't do this. Shut up. Anya lifted the kettle. The steam curled upward, glinting white in the sunlight. And then, splash. Scalding water poured down. A scream ripped through the room. The air filled with steam. Yaibun's body recoiled, her hands trembling, clutching her shoulders, her dark skin blistering, turning red and raw. The kettle clattered to the floor, rolling across the marble, as smoke rose from the boiling floor. Her eyes stayed open, not in hatred, but in pain and silent pleading. Anya stumbled back, panting, her hands shaking, but her eyes glimmered with a sick, victorious madness. You'll never dare say my name again. Never. The old woman reached out weakly, whispering, "Child." And then the door burst open like thunder. Kit stood there. He had cut short his flight, driven by an unshakable dread. He froze. Steam filled the room. The smell of burnt flesh choked the air. He saw his mother writhing in pain on the floor. His wife holding the empty kettle, steam still rising from her silk dress. Anya. Dear God, what have you done? He rushed forward, kneeling beside his mother, wrapping her in his jacket, tears falling like rain. Mama, Mama, it's me, Kit. Her voice was faint. Don't hate her. I'll be fine. But when he turned, Anya stood frozen, her face pale, lips trembling. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to scare her. Scare her. Kit's voice broke. You poured boiling water on the woman who gave me life. The room shattered with his scream. A wine glass fell and exploded on the marble floor, like the sound of a son's heart breaking as he watched his mother burn by the hands of the woman he once loved. He carried his mother in his arms and ran out into the pouring rain. The sky opened. Bangkok poured heavy, furious, punishing. Steam rose, merging with the rain, blurring the scene. In his arms, Yaibun whispered softly, "Son, never let your kindness boil like this water." The Rolls-Royce sped off into the storm, its tail lights fading in the downpour. Behind them, the lights of the mansion went dark. By the window, Anya fell to her knees, clutching her head, her sobs mixed with the thunder, and no one could tell whether it was remorse or the fear of the price she would soon pay. The rain kept falling. Each drop struck the hospital windows of Bangkok Central like the knocking of a guilty conscience. Inside the recovery room, the smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint, haunting scent of burnt skin, the memory of scalding water still clinging to everyone who had witnessed it. The rain kept falling. Each drop struck the hospital windows of Bangkok Central like the knocking of a guilty conscience. Inside the recovery room, the smell of antiseptic mixed with the faint, haunting scent of burnt skin, the memory of scalding water still clinging to everyone who had witnessed it. Yaibun lay motionless, half her body wrapped in white bandages. Her face was streaked with tears, though her lips made no sound. Beside her bed, Kit sat, gripping her hand tightly, his voice hoarse and trembling. "Mama, I called the police. Anya will pay for this. I swear." But she closed her eyes, her voice fragile, barely more than a breath. "No, my son. Don't let mercy become a blade. Forgiveness is the only road that will let your soul rest." He tightened his grip, eyes red. "Mama, she tried to kill you. How can you defend her? Because you once loved her, my son. And because I don't want you to lose your soul." Outside in the hallway, reporters whispered and cameras clicked. The headlines had already gone viral. Siam global tycoon Kit sang in family scandal, mother scalded by daughter-in-law. The hospital gates were crowded with flashing cameras, and through every lens, the image of a son sitting silently beside his burned mother became the portrait of divine retribution. But inside Kit's heart, something else was boiling. He couldn't understand why his gentle mother kept pleading for mercy for the woman who had nearly killed her. Something didn't add up. The price of ambition. 3 days later, Kit returned to the mansion with Inspector Pichai. The rain had stopped, but moisture still clung to the white walls. The house felt cold, empty, and heavy. He walked slowly through the hallway, past the place where voices once shouted, and stopped at the electric kettle, still bearing the mark of burned metal. The inspector opened his laptop, connecting it to the hard drive from the security cameras. The screen flickered to life. "Let's see what really happened," he said. The footage began to play. At first, it looked ordinary, Anya entering the room, Yaibun sitting by the window. But when the playback slowed, the truth emerged. Anya had deliberately unplugged the kettle and poured the boiling water. It wasn't an accident. In that moment, as the water fell, Yaibun didn't raise her hand to shield herself. She reached up to protect a framed photo of her son on the table, shielding it from the water. Kit froze. His blood felt like ice. He stared at the screen and then broke down, sobbing. She really tried to kill my mother." Inspector Pichai nodded gravely. "We'll press charges, but there's one more thing you should see." He played the final seconds of the recording. After Kit carried his mother out, Anya collapsed to the floor, clutching her head, muttering, "I just wanted her to sign. Just sign." Then she hurled the contract papers across the floor, the documents that would have transferred Kit's company shares into her name. Kit closed his eyes, tears spilling down his trembling hands. "I brought ambition into my home and it burned my mother." When Yaibun awoke, she looked at her son. The warm hospital light reflected off her wrinkled face. Each line a road carved by time. "My son," she whispered. "Don't let anger drag you down. Rebuild, but with compassion." He held her hand, his voice breaking. "Mama, I saw everything. You were betrayed. What should I do? Turn your pain into light, my child. Don't burn anyone else. Only those who forgive are truly strong." The Bridge of Forgiveness. That evening, Anya was arrested. The media swarmed the station, cameras flashing. But when she saw her husband, she broke down crying. "Kit, I just wanted you to love me like you love your mother. I was afraid you'd leave me." He looked at her, tired, hollow, emptied of rage. "You left yourself behind the moment you poured that first drop." Later, Yaibun was wheeled into the hospital courtyard. Sunlight rested softly on her white bandages. The wind carried the fresh scent of rain-soaked earth. Kit sat beside her, holding a purple orchid pot from the mansion. "I brought this from the house. I want to replant it, this time in real soil." She smiled, eyes gentle. "Good, because flowers only live when their roots are true, just like people." He nodded, gazing at the setting sun. "I'll sell all my shares, Mama. I'll use the money to start a charity in your name, the Boone Foundation, to help abused mothers and disabled women, and I'll go back to Klong Toi, rebuild the old bridge you once pushed your cart across." Her eyes filled with tears, her smile peaceful. "Now I know my son has truly come home." Breaking news, oil tycoon Kit Sang resigns from Siam Global, launches foundation for poor women and the disabled. Trial for Anya Sang set for next week. And in a small wooden house in Klong Toi, people hung a black and white photo of Yaibun with the words written beneath, "Forgiveness is the fire that purifies the soul." Then the drums began to beat slowly as the narrator's voice faded. Some burns heal on the skin, but others burn deep in the heart, and only love can soothe them. And when the boiling water cools, we finally see who truly carries the warmest heart.